guys, I'm going to record the episode, but it's just, yeah. I got to separate it. If I can get Mega Rooch. He doesn't seem to...
New Glade Plugins Plus. Now with scent notice technology. Expertly designed to reduce nose blindness, with more waves of fragrance that last up to 80 days.
Shows. Oh, it's like a...
S.C. Johnson.
That's like a... Okay, nah. Bro.
Pod's biggest sale of the summer is extended. Save up to 25% on moving and storage.
Stupid ads. I think I can get a better one. Not too sure. What is this? Miss it. No. Alright, I'll be back. Picture in chat. But I'm always gonna type in E. Okay. Here we go, guys. It's exciting. Alright. Very excited. Let's go.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Uno Amalgam series, the series where I actually have to make a game now because it is Phase 2, baby. Last episode, I finally finished combining 886 Uno versions into one stupid mess. And you're not going to believe this part, but the current Amalgam is big. I guess when you combine 886 card games, there tend to be a lot of cards.
True.
If only this could have been foreseen. While 1,242 total cards is not unheard of in the world of tabletop gaming, I do still want to achieve my goal of making the game $100 or less once it's finally done. And anything helps at this point, honestly. This episode is going to be all about reducing the card count to be a little more manageable and the ways I went about doing it. However, before I get into the juicy game development side of developing this game, I gotta do some clarifying. It's clarification time. You didn't think I'd stop doing this, did you? The last video in this series performed better than usual and attracted some new viewers. Welcome to the madness, everyone. Due to this, though, I got some questions that are a bit more general that I thought I would address. One question that was quite common is how will the game work for physically disabled individuals if there are mechanics that require people to move in certain ways? There were also some people that seemed to be a little distraught at Uno Junior Move's inclusion, since this is likely the first time those viewers saw a physical movement mechanic. And some people went a step further and recommended I remove Uno Junior Move from the Amalgam because it's the only Uno version that makes chemicards physically inaccessible. It's this statement that clued me in that maybe some people haven't been here for the whole series because, fun fact, there are at least 20 different mechanics from several Uno versions that involve physical movement that are already included in the Amalgam. And Uno Junior Move is only one of them. So Uno Junior Move isn't to blame here. I also don't blame people for not knowing about those other mechanics, considering how long this series has been. It just kind of caught me off guard to only now be hearing people bring this topic up. Full transparency, I will not be removing mechanics from the game unless I absolutely have to. Will I alter mechanics slightly if I believe it will help the final game? Yes. But I wouldn't do something as drastic as removing movement from movement-based mechanics because that would defeat the point of them existing, as well as the entire point of this project. Movement mechanics are an entire genre of mechanic, and it wouldn't be right to leave them out of the Amalgam, but that's just my opinion. To put it bluntly, in its base form, Chemicards' full gameplay will not be accessible to physically disabled individuals, nor is it designed to be. That's not me discriminating against physically disabled people, that's just the nature of the game. Like, Twister was not designed for people who use wheelchairs, but that's not because the people who made Twister hate people who use wheelchairs, it's because that's just the kind of game Twister is, and the type of game it was designed to be. These aren't even my mechanics, so if you want to be mad, you should get mad at Mattel. I'm the combining guy, not the creating guy when it comes to Uno. All of that being said, there are two main ways that you can go about handling this situation if you or one of your players is physically disabled. General Rule 45 in the rules doc states that if an effect is physically impossible to carry out for any reason, the effect is nullified. This could easily apply to all movement mechanics as a solution for this problem. Another way you could fix this problem is by using house rules to eliminate those mechanics from the game, which is totally allowed and encouraged. Because there are over 500 mechanics, people are bound to love and hate specific ones, and you're free to change the game to suit your preferences. And in this case, your needs. Hopefully this helps, and please understand, I'm doing everything in my power to make this game accessible while not compromising the point of the project. This entire episode is about reducing the card count to make the game cheap enough for more people to afford. I'm going all out with colorblindness support as well. More on that in a later episode. Okay, moving on. Uno Teams got unofficially revealed, and by the looks of it, Mattel is presenting it as the next major spin-off of Uno, similar to Flex and Flip. Thankfully, my Discord community tracked down all of the info on it. Thanks, dudes. Uno Teams was the first Uno version revealed post-Phase 1, and as tempting and as fun as it looks, I simply cannot add it right now. I am sorry. Maybe later. That goes for any other Uno versions Mattel releases during Phase 2 as well. A little bit more about Phase 2 in general before I move on. As I said, this phase is a lot more game development focused, and it is at this point I actually gotta start using my brain, instead of mindlessly copy-pasting rules from one list to another. And like most others, I too struggle to use my brain, so this will be a little more challenging conceptually. My goal with Chemicards is to be a representation of every Uno version I've covered in this series so far, and not directly removing any unique mechanics, no matter how small that uniqueness is. But at the same time, almost everything is subject to change. The artwork and the game's keywords will be changed, obviously, but some mechanics will be altered slightly, and a lot of balancing will occur when it comes to the characters and companions especially. What really matters is their representation, but I'm trying to stay faithful to the originals. Compromises will have to be made, and in the end, it is my decision how the game will be finalized. Some of you will love the choices I make, and some of you won't. This is inevitable. Please do not get into arguments over a game that hasn't even been made yet. Thank you. Clarification time over. Now it's elimination time. Wait, what? Yup, believe it or not, 6 more eliminatable Uno versions have been found. This means there will actually be 892 Uno versions represented in Chemicards, and that's still subject to change. Those of you who wanted a clean 888 Uno versions represented, I am sorry. Anyway, here's the list. Uno Fast, Uno Zoo & Co., Uno Boomo plus bonus, Uno Cinco bundle, Uno Domino's Burger King Spanish, and Uno Simpsons Homer Head 2007. Oh, it's incredible that I can make the elimination list longer even though Phase 1 is done. It makes me happy seeing the number go up. On an unrelated note, you should subscribe. I'm on the way to 50K. Let's get that number. Whoop, 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 whoop. Yeah. All right, let's get condensing. I would like to get this group of 1,242 cards as close to just 1,000 as possible. Less than that if I can help it. Is it possible? I don't know exactly, but like I said, anything helps. I know of one thing I can do right off the bat to take a huge chunk off of that number. Mattel hates him. This goober can remove 85 whole cards from Chemicards with this one simple trick. Click here to learn more. Don't click on strange links, no matter how much you want Spamton G Spamton to be real. Anyway, I can actually remove 85 cards from the game right now. Watch this.
How?
The Danger deck is now double-sided. Yeah, that's it. The full Danger deck from Uno Ultimate has 170-ish cards in it currently, and that's assuming there are no duplicate effects that I can remove from it later. By making the cards double-sided, like the main draw pile is, that number is cut in half, which saves us about 85 cards. It's so easy. I can actually remove another 16 cards quite easily as well. Recall the power cards from Uno Flex. Each of the 16 possible players gets one of these cards, which can be flipped to indicate if they're able to use the flex sides of cards or not. I don't know about you, but it seems to me like these cards have a lot of unutilized space. So I'm going to combine the power cards with another card type that each possible player gets one copy of, the life cards from Uno Bumo. The life cards are very similar in physical functionality. When you lose a life in-game, you flip your life card over. How do I plan on incorporating these two flippy mechanics together without them interfering with each other? It's simple, really. Us humans are capable of rotating handheld objects in a 3D space in effectively any direction, and I'm going to take advantage of that. I'll put a basic diagram of what I'm talking about on screen, but I'm imagining a card that's been split in half horizontally between red and green sides. And in the center of the card, there's a life indicator. On the flip side of the card, everything is exactly the same, except the life indicator won't be as indicaty. With this system in place, when you use or gain power for your power card, you rotate the card 180 degrees instead of flipping it. And if you lose a life, you flip the card to the flip side to indicate this. All of the same functionality of two cards has been condensed into one, but I can do better. I can just as easily remove another 16 cards by adding the movements from Uno Junior Move onto these cards as well. Kinda like this. It's perfect. These cards will be randomly given out after all, so the different movements will be randomized if they're scattered evenly amongst the 16 cards. So, just like that, another 32 cards have been removed with the power, life, and move cards combined. So now there's only about 1,125 cards, and I haven't even gotten into the complex stuff yet. Not to mention the fact that the setup of this game just got shorter. If you've been paying attention during Phase 1, you'll know this is a very good thing. While we're here, this won't remove any cards from the game, but something else that would optimize this new Power Life Move card even more is adding the player numbers to them. Like I said, these cards will be randomly dealt out, and assigned player numbers don't have to be dealt in sequential order. So putting them on these cards is another easy win. You would just select the cards necessary for your player count, shuffle them, and then deal them. That way, cards that randomly select a player can use player numbers and dice, no problem. There's almost definitely more ways to condense the cards that aren't present in the main draw pile, so if any of you longtime viewers have any ideas on how to do that, feel free to let me know in the comments. I've just been sitting on a few of these for so long, so I needed to talk about them. Anyways, that was the non-complex stuff, so allow me to get to the complex stuff now. When it comes to condensing cards present in the main draw pile of Chemicards, before I can ask how, I must ask what? As in, what card types actually need condensing? So I decided to engage with one of the many things I'm not good at, otherwise known as math. Thankfully, the math is very easy to understand. I decided to break down base Uno into 3 different card types: number cards, non-number action cards, and wild cards. Base Uno has 76 number cards, 24 non-number action cards, and 12 wild cards if you include custom wilds, which I will be. There are 112 cards total. This means 68% of the cards are number cards, 21% are non-number action cards, 11% are wild cards. So that's all well and good, but these numbers would be meaningless if I didn't have something to compare them to. So allow me to compare these same stats to Uno Show 'em No Mercy. I did something like this a lot earlier in this series, so it only makes sense. And Uno Show 'em No Mercy is a great example of a more exaggerated and extreme version of Uno. Uno Show 'em No Mercy has 80 number cards, 64 non-number action cards, and 24 wild cards. That means there are 168 total cards in No Mercy. meaning 48% of them are number cards,
that's crazy.
38% are non-number action cards, and 14% are wild cards. When you compare the percentages between the two Uno versions, you can see there's a 20% difference in the amount of number cards present. No Mercy has much less number cards, proportionally speaking. Because of this, No Mercy has more of the other two categories.
21.
Considering Chemicards is a similarly extreme version of Uno, it's likely Chemicards has similar proportion percentage changes to No Mercy. So now let's compare the stats of Chemicards' main draw pile to these two. These percentages are approximate and not final. Currently, Chemicards is 43% number cards, 34% non-number action cards, and 20% wild cards. So, as you can see, it actually does follow the same trends No Mercy does, with there being proportionally too few number cards and too much of the other two types. Although, as expected, Chemicards has 6% more wild cards proportionally compared to No Mercy, which may be a bit too much, but I don't know. It's honestly interesting to see how Chemicards compares here, and how similar it is to No Mercy when comparing all three games. I think regardless of what happens next, the ratio Chemicards currently has is likely playable and enjoyable without being hindered by the ratio itself. I do still want to condense some cards though, and I want to get some of these numbers closer to base Uno if I can help it. So what do I do with this information? Well, these numbers suggest if I want to make the game more like Uno in a proportional sense, I need to condense the amount of non-number action cards and wild cards. I can't just add more numbers because at this point there are no numbers to add, and I'm not trying to make the game more expensive. As the history of this series shows, adding more numbers and colors is the quickest way to add too many cards to the game. I'm trying to avoid that in Phase 2. So now the real question becomes, how will I condense non-number action cards and wild cards without directly removing their effects? This is a question that could have infinite answers, but I only get to choose one, so it's kinda difficult. I would like to start by addressing the wild card condensing, because I think it's easier to understand. So, y'all remember flex cards, right? From Uno Flex? If you don't know what I'm talking about, just go watch the Triple S Games video on Uno Flex like a normal person. I talked about the power cards from Uno Flex earlier, and they're the cards that allow you to play flex cards. Just as a reminder, flex cards make up 50% of the entire deck. Whenever you use your power card to play a flex card, the attributes of that card change to fit the card's flex side as you play it, for the most part. Also, for the most part, this just changes the color of the card. You can have a red card that flexes into a green card, but it would keep the same number while doing so. Flexing is a useful tool. Something very strange happens when you flex an action card, though. For example, when you flex a reverse card, it becomes a reverse and skip. Suddenly that card does two things instead of just one. If you flex a skip, it becomes everyone, which is about as direct of an upgrade as you can get. When you flex cards with effects, the effects become more powerful. And the same can be said with wild effects. A normal wild symbol without any real effects can flex into a targeted draw 2 or an all draw 2, depending on the copy of the card you have. A draw 4 flexes into a targeted draw 4. These are crazy buffs. And it makes sense because you have to spend a resource to get those powerful effects, that being your flex power. So this gave me an idea. What if specific wild effects were made into flex effects for other wild cards? Now, I already know what you're going to say. Wouldn't that be too great of a change to the effects you choose to convert into flex effects? My honest opinion is no. I'm not actually changing the effects at all. I'm just placing them behind the flex barrier, so to speak. I think there are a lot of beneficial aspects to this change as well. For one, it would get us closer to our desired proportions, at least a little. For two, let's face it, there are a lot of cards in this game that are very powerful, more powerful than they have any right to be. Locking some of these behind the flex barrier will require players to complete an extra step before playing super busted cards, and I think it's a perfectly natural way to indirectly nerf those cards specifically. For three, this would at least partially solve a problem that Uno Flex itself creates. Because 50% of the cards are flex cards, if I didn't make this change, 50% of the wild cards would have a targeted draw 2, an all draw 2, or a targeted draw 4 on their flex sides. Trust me, that is far too many draw effects. even for Chema cards. For 4, there's a nice logic to the idea of using your power card to upgrade specific effects into more powerful versions of themselves. Because there have been so many similar effects added over the course of Phase 1, there are plentiful effects that have more powerful or less powerful counterparts. For 5, this would prevent oversaturation of specific effect types. There are some effect types that are way more common than others, and decreasing the amount of card faces these common types are present on will result in a less repetitive gameplay experience.
Cool.
This is a good thing. Here's a basic example of how combining effects using flex sides could work. The primary effect on the card could be something like the wild draw color symbol. When you play this card, choose a color. The next player must then draw cards until they draw a card of the selected color. It's a strong effect on its own, but if you were to flex this card, perhaps this symbol could transform into something like the Wild Dead Men Tell No Tales card, one of the most powerful cards in the game. When you play this card, choose a color. Starting with the next player in the turn order, all players must draw cards until they draw a card of the chosen color. It fits quite well, huh? The Dead Men Tell No Tales card is a direct upgrade of the Wild Draw color, so it would make sense that you have to spend your power to play the stronger effect. There's also another added benefit of combining similar effects in this way, and that's text space efficiency. The bulk of the card would describe the original effect, while the flex portion would only describe the differences between the flex and non-flex effects. It solves so many problems. Anyways, this whole explanation leads me to one of the reasons this video took so long to make. If I was going to do this, I would need to categorize all 504 unique mechanics so I would know which ones would potentially be compatible with each other. So, yeah, I did that. It took me a little while. It would be a crime if I didn't share my findings, so allow me to list off the categories that every mechanic in the game can fit into. Attack effects, physical movement effects, dare effects, draw effects, draw until effects, center card effects, discard effects, card swapping effects, card flipping effects, skip effects, multi-outcome dice effects, card revealing effects, warlike effects, verbal effects, passive discard pile effects, reset effects, effect-dependent effects, place in front of you effects, match aid effects, friendly effects, useless effects, discard limiter effects, defense effects, custom effects, visual aid effects, minigame effects, detrimental effects, food effects, ultimate effects, duplication effects, point effects, and other. Wow, that's 32 categories of effects. That means that the average category has about 16 different effects in it. For those of you wondering, the category with the most effects, quite predictably, was the draw category with 70 effects, followed closely by defense effects with 61. I meant what I said. This game does not need an oversaturation of draw effects. So with all of this organized information, how many physical cards will I be able to condense using this combining method? The answer is yet to be determined because I'm still working on it. In fact, this is something I'll be working on for most of Phase 2 as I actually make the physical cards. I'm not going to just pair up effects willy-nilly. I'll only do it if it makes sense. In the end, this method of condensing may not even condense that many cards, but that's okay. I think people will assume this game has a few too many wild cards regardless of how many are actually in the final game. It's just something to expect out of a project like this. Not to mention, even if the wild ratio is slightly higher than that of Uno No Mercy, it isn't game-breaking. It isn't even necessarily bad. It simply is. So this is something I'll chip away at over time. Moving on to non-number action cards. How do I plan to condense those? Well, there are two main ways. I could do something similar to what I did with the wild cards, but considering there are far less non-wild effects than wild effects, making good flex pairs would be a lot more rare and may not happen at all. Every time this would occur, though, I'd likely be removing 5 physical cards from the game, so even a few combos would be beneficial. There is another way, and it's a change that would be very easy for me to make. One of the most common suggestions I got in the comments throughout the entirety of Phase 1 is moving some of the symbols to the new number cards. People have said that there are too many numbers that have nothing interesting about them and things similar to that. Regardless of how I condense non-number action cards, I think the best way to resolve this issue is to spread out the modifiers before the symbols are considered. Almost every modifier has nothing to do with the number they were originally placed on, so those could be spread out evenly amongst a bunch of the new numbers. This also has the potential to eliminate the need for 16 modifier reference cards, which I talked about earlier in this series. If there aren't 3 or more modifiers stacked on top of some cards, then it's possible their effect descriptions could fit on the
3 or
cards
more.
alongside whatever symbols that
might
card
have, like,
may
10
have.
descriptions.
So yeah, regardless of what is done with the
Yeah.
non-number action symbols,
This is
modifiers can
ridiculous.
totally fill some of that dead space on the new numbers. But this is the big idea. What if sets of non-number action symbols were combined with sets of number cards that lack symbols? For example, there are currently 5 cards, or 10 total card faces, of 62 number cards in the game. There are also 5 cards, or 10 total card faces, of skip everyone cards. So what if these two card types were combined so that every colored 62 number card had the skip everyone symbol on it, rather than there being no symbol? Obviously, this is a pretty random example, but what if the cards were condensed in this way? With each symbol set that was added to a number set, once again, about 5 physical cards could be removed and money could be saved. This would also help with filling the dead space on the new number cards that so many people brought up. Admittedly,
We
this
just
would
have
kind of
normal
make
numbers,
the
though.
ratios of number cards and non-number action cards worthless if they were blended too much, though. These statistics wouldn't be quite as viable in decision-making at that point. This also has the chance to alter the gameplay of chem cards quite dramatically. Consider the following. Let's say I moved nearly every colored symbol set onto nearly every new number set, meaning there would be nearly no action cards that aren't also number cards. What would that do to the game? Perhaps one of the most obvious differences is just how many physical cards could be condensed. This change would have the potential to remove about 300 physical cards from the game by itself. This would put the game well below 1,000 cards, even if I didn't do any of the other condensing I already did in this video. The game would also be a lot cheaper because of this. If this condensing method was used, almost every card in the game would do something special. Almost every card would be completely unique and interesting. The play experience in general would be very different from Uno. Players would feel a lot more powerful. But what are the side effects of a change as dramatic as this? It would certainly make certain cards far more powerful and other cards far less powerful. But there's nothing inherently wrong with that. All of these mechanics are getting taken out of their natural environment for chemicards anyway, so it makes sense some of these cards would be valued differently here. If there did end up being absolutely no number cards without symbols, though, this could potentially break a select few mechanics. Perhaps this condensing method should only be used in moderation, and perhaps some should genuinely do nothing. There are a lot of different ways to go about condensing this game. Here is my plan going forward for condensing non-number action cards. I think the way to go about this would be to use a combination of the 2 condensing methods I previously described. The amount of flex pairs that could be made likely isn't that much, so I'll utilize that when I can. Otherwise, I think a few select sets of colored symbols can be placed on a few sets of number cards. Most likely they'll be placed on higher value number cards for point-based reasons. But not nearly all of the new numbers will get symbols slapped on them, and that void can easily be filled in by modifiers. There are also a few sets of colored action symbols I don't think belong on sets of number cards at all due to their relative importance. Things like the flip cards and whatnot. They deserve their own card face, gosh darn it. That, along with any other condensing ideas you all may have in the comments, will surely get this game below the 1,000 card mark. Moderation is a good thing when it comes to big changes like this, so I think this is a good solution. But I also want to know what you all think of my condensing ideas, because none of this is set in stone. Do you like my ideas, or do you think I got a little too silly with this one? Let me know what you think, and let me know what other ideas you may have for card condensing in the comments. Before I reveal what I'll be doing in the next episode, I just wanted to thank the Amalgamation Donation Club. This time around, we have Dandis TF, iPipe Landcakes, Someone Somewhere 6, Chromium, Ka-YT, Elias Stenbach, Fallen Angel Viox, Ento the Chestnut Knight, Skyroll of the Stars, Jamdrop 196, Lomer 7, Here Comes Bort, The Donation Guy, Drake Waffle, Gen X, Crazinator 5, Splashy Flame, JCat, Local Wakasagi, TM Gaming, and Zombie. Thank you all for your donations. They help the channel and me very much. So, this was the first episode of Phase 2. A bit different, huh? Feels weird not talking about 10 or more Uno versions in a video, but it is a breath of fresh air, at least on my end. If this episode's style wasn't your cup of tea, don't worry. Essentially, every episode of Phase 2 will be different from the last. Next episode is a perfect example. I'm going to be talking about card design and the different things that need to be incorporated into the artwork of cards from the main draw pile. I'll likely be providing some sneak peeks of actual card art in the next episode as well, so you won't want to miss that. I hope you enjoyed this more game design oriented episode. Welcome to Phase 2, everyone. Unfortunately, it is now time to end the video. Subscribe if you want to see the development of this game progress towards completion. Like the video if you in fact liked the video, and I'll talk more about Uno in the near future.
Ooh. Let's go. All right. Oh, that was cool. Nothing. I am gonna work on the Murdon's death count now. So. All right. Well, bye.